So today we have Dr. Javier Cavazos. He is a faculty member in the College of Education and P216 integration. When he is not writing or teaching, he enjoys spending time with his wife and daughter, as well as watching sports. And today he is joining us and he will be speaking to us about the importance of resilience in our teaching and in students' learning. Welcome. Thank you for facilitating this session and welcome everyone.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Cavazos. So let me share my screen and begin. Am I sharing the right one? Can y'all see this? Yes, okay, great. So we will begin, and like Dr. Cavazos said, my name is Javier. I am from the College of Education and P216 integration. I have various roles there, but the one, and today we're going to talk about how to help students identify and cultivate resilience and positive emotions. But you see this big arrow on the screen, and really forget all my titles and even my PhD. The reason I'm here is because of those initials on the side of my name, LPC. I am a licensed professional counselor, which means that I can see clients outside of that university and help them with mental health. And I mention that because that role has really allowed me to see the importance of helping students build and cultivate resilience. So that's why I'm here today. You know, I was also the former director of the Center for Teaching Excellence, and I don't do a lot of workshops anymore, but this one I felt really was an important one, especially with COVID-19 and the various things that are affecting our students. So I hope you will take away something from this conversation. So one thing I learned from my time at CTE and as a faculty member, objectives are very important. No matter how short or long the conversation, we have to have objectives. So the two objectives for today are: one, I hope we can all be able to describe resilience and gratitude. And look, I know we all have our own definitions, our own experiences of these concepts, but hopefully we can walk away with a better understanding of what these look like in college classrooms. And then number two, the big one, I want all of us to take away at least one strategy that we can use to help students cultivate positive emotions in our classes. So if I was at CTE and leading a workshop, I probably would have started with a background knowledge probe or something to get the conversation going. But I've been removed from that, so I'd rather start with frequently asked questions on this topic, and that will contextualize the conversation. I think the biggest question that always comes up with this topic is, how much time do I need to do some of these things in my classes, followed by, I don't have time to do any of that. And look, I'm not going to argue with people about that. I will say that some of these things take a minute, some of these things take 5 minutes. But for those of us who want to explore how it could look beyond that, you know, there are some ways to integrate some assignments into classes. But at the very minimum, these activities do not take a lot of time. They do not have to. And the other big question is, how can I talk to students about resilience when I'm not trained, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a psychologist, any of that? And I understand and I appreciate that perspective. But I will say this, that when we talk about students' resilience, number one, we just want to show students that we care and we value their well-being and their mental health. And I think it starts from there. And yeah, of course, there might be some students who need more help beyond what we as PhD faculty are prepared to do. But I don't think we need to be trained in mental health or counseling to do some of these things in our classes. So those are the two big questions that come up all the time when we talk about helping students build resilience in the classroom. The other important one, I know Dr. Cavazos mentioned this, the teaching consultants, and you see this image, right? SALT, students as learners and teachers. I know some of them are here today, and I'm just pushing this here because I don't want to commit them to do work that they might not want to, but I think they are perfect candidates to help us learn how to integrate some of these strategies that we're going to talk about today into our classes. I can tell you, I reached out to them in the summer for my syllabus and some assignments, and the level of feedback that they gave me was phenomenal. It was amazing. So I imagine they could do something similar if we had questions about helping students cultivate resilience in the classroom. So let me start with a story. And really this story is the center of why I'm here and why we're talking about resilience. You see this image of Keys Academy. And this is a school in Harlingen, Texas, where I grew up. I don't know the correct term for the school, but it's for a school who maybe students K through 12 drop out and they come to the school for credit recovery and things like that. Well, for 3 years, I was very blessed to lead conversations at night with parents and kids for their credit recovery program. So what that looked like was, for whatever reason, maybe kids missed school, maybe kids skipped school, maybe kids were just sick, but the state of Texas has laws about how many classes students can miss in a given year. So the parents and the kids had to go at 6 o'clock at night to this school to hear presentations, and I gave one of those presentations once per month. And I'm mentioning this because every presentation, I always started with this question. 50 parents were in the room, 50 kids. I bet you can imagine how those parents felt. You can imagine how they felt about being there. Probably didn't want to be there. And I always started with this question. How many of you, very simple question, how many of you are happy right now? That's it. How many of you are happy right now? And you know what? There were several times when not one parent raised their hand. Not one parent raised their hand to indicate they were happy. You know why? Because they were thinking about not wanting to be there. They were mad at Harlingen CIC for making them be there. They're mad at the state of Texas for creating a law that dictated how to engage in credit recovery. And you know what? That was the whole purpose of that conversation about depression, anxiety, mental health, and wellness. And at the end of the presentation, it wasn't 100%, but more parents raised their hands because you know why? You know what I told them? This is tough for me to even think about. If I asked you that question at the beginning of the presentation and you were thinking about the person next to you, which was their son or daughter, their children, their health, their happiness, their safety, at the very minimum, their safety being there, more parents would have raised their hands. And that's the whole point of this resilience conversation, that a lot of people are structured in a way that we focus on the negative, we focus on the bad, we grumble, just like all those parents. I might have been one of them, right? I get it. I'm not criticizing them. My point is that when we talk about resilience, we're creating space for us, for our students, to think about the good, to think about the positive. So I really love that story because it really shows me and us that we need to help students remember that there are some good things in their life. So, you know, when I was talking to Dr. Cavazos, you know, she did mention to me that we need to contextualize resilience and gratitude and define it. So we'll start there. So the question is, what is resilience? And my guess is all of you have your own definition of what it is and what it looks like. The literature that I'm in defines resilience as the ability to bounce back from obstacles, right? That's the definition. But for a lot of us, we know what resilience looks like. And for me, you see this image of Moises Vivela Middle School in Harlingen. And I have this image because that was my late grandfather, right? They named a school after him. And whenever I think of resilience, I think of him. I think of him at 17 years old, losing his mother. His mom died when he was 17. His dad was left. I almost said stuck. I meant left. His father was left with 6 boys and three daughters. I think of my grandfather at that moment. I think of my grandfather when he came back from the Korean War with a lot of interesting stories. Some I won't repeat now, but when he was in the Korean War, you know, he told me that it was negative 30 degrees and they didn't have the proper clothing. And he came back with neuropathy, which was a horrible condition on his feet that plagued him for many, many years. So I think of him. I also think of my grandfather when I was 14. He was getting on an airplane to go to Houston, and terrible accident. He got hit in the eye, lost his right eye forever, lost that eyesight. So the point here is, you know, for resilience, the definition in our academic literature is the ability to bounce back from obstacles. But for all of you, we probably have something of what that looks like in terms of people that we know. And then the final definition, and this is really, you know, I know the presentation is focused on positive emotion, but this is the one that I want to really push today, gratitude. You see the image on the left. What is gratitude? We can read, right? Being grateful, thankful, feeling thankfulness and appreciation. And the reason I want to push this today and link it to resilience is because for college students and even for people in general, there's a ton of research to support the benefits of gratitude. You see this article on the right, Flourishing as Human Beings. This article pointed to several benefits: love, joy, hope, resilience, stronger relationships. All right. Another one. And again, these are all articles. There's much more to support it. People who express gratitude on a consistent basis are generally happier. All right. I get that. And here's the big one, the one that's probably most relevant for college students. Gratitude may increase self-control. Why does that matter to college students? Well, you know, we all know the week, the night, the days before a test, what do we want students to do? Prepare, study, learn, right? So self-control is that, you know, instead of going out or doing X, Y, and Z, I need to stick and study. So I think this is the big connection between gratitude, self-control, and then resilience as well. What does self-control look like? I think you all have learned by now that I'm a big fan of teaching through images, but I have to include one quote here because, you know, they just said it so well. So if you wouldn't mind hearing me read it, this author said, "The way practicing gratitude induces well-being goes far beyond just forcing yourself to be more optimistic. It literally rewires your entire brain to value your life differently. Although not particularly intuitive, practicing gratitude trains your mind to recognize that it values your future self more than it values immediate gratification." And look, going back to my story at Keys Academy, not everybody is always thinking about gratitude. I know I'm not. I mean, just being transparent, because gratitude is an intentional activity. Some people argue with me that this stuff is fluff, this stuff is easy. It's not easy. It is not easy to express gratitude in a meaningful and authentic way. And I think what we're saying here is that when people are grateful and engage in intentional activities to express gratitude on a consistent basis, that might be related to self-control, which might be related to a few other things. And the last point I'll mention here, and it goes to this again, I don't usually get into debates anymore on these issues, right? I just don't have the energy. But my argument here is that gratitude is not something that just comes. It's something that has to be practiced. And that's where you all come in as instructors to put the questions for students to think about and to consider doing. So the last slide before we talk about some of the strategies. And again, if you want to write in the chat box, you want to take like 10 or 20 seconds to just pause and think. You see this slide, this puzzle, right? I know that when we have a personal connection to a topic, we're more likely to invest in some of the work to implement and apply it. I get that. I know all of you are here for a specific reason. I also get that as well. But if anybody, maybe one person would like to share, what's your personal connection to this topic? Either your own resiliency or what you've seen with your students in the classroom. If one person wouldn't mind sharing, that would be great.
I guess I could share. Hello, my name is Sharon Helsley McGinley, and I teach in the School of Nursing. My students are all registered nurses, and so they're on the front lines of COVID, and maintaining their presence in their academic journey has been a challenge. But even more so, sometimes the positivity and keeping them moving forward in a positive way. They're faced with adversity every day. So that's the reason I'm here today, to come up with some different kind of tools to perhaps support them in their academic journey.
And thank you so much for sharing that, and for the important work you do, because you're training very important people who have such important roles. You know, Alyssa and I have an uncle who's the CEO of Valley Baptist in Harlingen. And I've talked to him, and he shared with me that a lot of people are, you know, tired, right? They're tired. The nurses, the staff, even the future students, like the ones you are training, of what they're going into. So absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that, because these are just a few things that we can do to help students think about their resilience and gratitude. The one thing I do want to mention here, and again, we'll have 5 strategy, and thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to beat people to the punch, because this always comes up and people get very upset with me. And again, I don't have the energy to battle today, but some people think that these strategies are fluff, they don't matter, and that they're Hallmark. And by Hallmark, I mean short and quick, simple, like those 2 sentences, don't worry, be happy. And by no means, and I know we're being recorded, I'm gonna say this twice, I am not saying that. I am not saying we need to tell students, ignore your reality, don't worry, be happy, life is full of rainbows. That's not what I'm saying. There's no way. What I am saying, again, as my training as a mental health counselor, you see the picture in the background, and I will battle on this one. I will tell clients, students, yeah, you might have, you see all those blue frown faces. You might have 100 negative things in your life right now. My role is to help you always remember in the front of your mind that one smiley face. And if you go back to the story I told you with those parents at the presentation at Keys Academy, and I get emotional thinking about this, I really do, because they weren't thinking about their one smiley face in that moment. And what's the one smiling face? Their kid next to them, healthy, semi-happy, I don't know. I say semi-happy because the kids weren't happy to be there either. But that's what we're talking about here. We're trying to create space for that smiley face. A professor once told me, you want me to ask students what they're grateful for after they get a 45 on their examination? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not telling you to ignore their performance on the test. I'm asking you to help students remember all the other things in their life in addition to that test, because you know what, that one test is not the only thing that they have going on in their life. So that's very important. I really want to make that clear, that I'm not saying to tell students to ignore their reality. I'm not saying that. I'm saying these things that we're going to talk about right now are designed to help them remember some of the other good things in their life. So if we start here, we start with number 5. There's 5 things, right? This one's called Hunt the Good Stuff. And I want to preface this with, I know some of us here experienced a training in January 2016 that was funded by the then Vice President for Student Success, by Kristen Croyle. It was a resilience training from faculty from the University of Pennsylvania, and came down and trained a lot of us. And one of the strategies they talked about was hunt the good stuff. What does that look like? I'll say 2 things. One, it just means for us, and then I'll talk about the students, to identify the good things in our life. So that could look like, at the end of the day, at the end of a long day, a lot of people, if you watch the news, you're hearing crime, 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 and then more crime, right? So it trains us to think of all the negative. If you're on Facebook, this is a true story, right? One of the last images I saw going to bed one night on Facebook was of a young girl who died due to starvation. And again, I'm not trying to ignore the reality of that. I'm just saying that sometimes our brain is wired to focus on the negative. So hunt the good stuff means at the end of the day, what went well? What's one good thing that happened? Or what's one good thing that we have in our life? How could that look like for your students? The last 5 minutes of class, if it's face-to-face or online synchronous, pause the class and just ask students, what's good in your life right now? Hunt the good stuff. What's one good thing in your life right now? Somebody argue with me that they don't have time to do that in a face-to-face classes 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, what are you doing the last 5 minutes of class? Like lecturing. All right, I'm not sure how many people are still hearing the presentation an hour and a half later, right? But that's the point. If you're willing to sacrifice 5 minutes at the end of a class, ask students to hunt the good stuff. What's one good thing? What's that one smiley face? Or better yet, then this is a true story. I observed a class at 8 a.m. It was a chemistry class, 150 kids, 8 a.m., right? That's tough. The professor did this activity the first 5 minutes of class. So imagine the students are walking in, they're all tired. Maybe some of them are grumbling, they're not thrilled to be there. You know, they're still semi-asleep. But what this does, it flipped what they were thinking about so they could identify something good, something positive. So again, I hope you see that this is creating space for students to think differently, to think about something differently. So it could take 5 minutes, beginning of class, end of class, or if you're like me teaching online, we could do it online in a discussion forum, in breakout rooms. So this is number 5. Number 4, I think this is probably, one of the most important ones. Number 4, put it in perspective. So what does that mean? I'll give you an example. I know Dr. Cavazos can probably tell you more about this, but something I never coped well with was when my daughter would get sick and the thermometer would read 103, 103.2, 103.3, like horrible. And what do you think I did? I catastrophized. I'm just going to be transparent. I started thinking, wow, this is horrible. This is life or death. And I also think that comes from, as a child, I heard stories of my grandfather's sister who had a high fever and they didn't get her help in time, and she had permanent damage forever. So it might come from that too. But put it in perspective means when something happens, we need to ask 3 questions, right? What's the worst possible scenario in that situation? I hate saying this, but death, right? My daughter would pass away. What's the best possible scenario? The thermometer is wrong, there's a mistake. But the most important question is, what's the likely scenario? Likely scenario is, she has a fever, her body's fighting an infection, we need to get her medicine, right? I also know that fever in certain cases, maybe it's a good thing because it shows the body's fighting, right? But the point here is that with this one, we can help students, again, going back to that failed exam, chemistry, biology, those are the subjects that come to mind for me that I struggle with, right? So if a student gets a 45 on an examination, some of them might think of the worst possible scenario. They catastrophize. I'm never gonna pass this class. I'm never gonna get into the graduate program I want to, and then it goes on and on and on. So if we ask them to pause and ask those 3 questions, the likely scenario is, I didn't do well, but it's not going to define my entire academic career as long as I continue to put in the work. So I really like this one. This one does require a little more time in terms of teaching students how to think differently. But I can tell you 10-15 minutes is well worth the investment because you're helping students really put things into perspective and not catastrophize the situation. So the last 3, and again, I'm starting to really wake up. I said I didn't have a lot of energy to fight, but seeing this really is starting to wake me up a little bit. Number 3, acts of kindness. So you see the image here, right? And I know a lot of people do this, but I think the key, what we're learning in the context of resilience, is that consistency, that intentional effort to do some of these things. Because when students are depressed, anxious, mad at the world, they stop doing these things. They stop thinking of other people. So for you as instructors, I mean, imagine just asking students, one, to think about something kind that they've done for somebody in the past X months, or better yet, ask them to do something like this in the next few days. Doesn't have to involve money, right? But one of the things that I know I like to do, that don't do it often, but at McDonald's, when I come up to the cashier, I ask them, I'll pay for the person behind me, right? And I always joke with other crowds that before I do that, I ask, well, what they order, right? Because you got to make sure that it's not football Sunday and they ordered 50 nuggets, you know? But the joke is that the one time I did ask that question, the cashier started saying what the person behind us ordered, and you know, it was like $32. Like, wow, that's impressive. And this was one person in the car, but we went ahead and did that because it felt really good, right? I mean, it's like, instead of buying a shirt, you know, you do that. But imagine for your students. And I think what we might find is that we don't do these things as often as we think we do. Those same presentation at Keys Academy, all the kids, right, the 14, 13-year-olds, they all raise their hand. They're doing all these acts of kindness. So I asked somebody, well, what's the last act of kindness you did? And this young, I think she was 12, young person said, I washed the dishes. And I looked at the mom and dad, and we kind of laughed. You know, we made that eye contact. That was that an act of kindness, or was that your role, right, as a kid learning to do chores? So really here, act of kindness is something that's beyond something that we normally do, that's trying to benefit somebody. So here, how it could look like in a class. And again, the student, the SALT partners, you know, they're the experts, right? They're the ones living these experiences as students right now in the middle of a pandemic. And I bet they can come up with other ways to help you integrate into the classes. But one idea is just, you know, create space for this. Last 5 minutes of class, you know, in the next week, do an act of kindness, write about it, reflect on it, talk about it. When we come back, let's just process it. Let's talk about it. And my guess is a lot of people will be happier that they did those things. So last two. Number two, the next last one is a meditation. So the true definition of meditation is being present in the moment. And I was gonna put that stereotypical picture that we all know about meditation. I was like, no, I better not, because it doesn't have to look like that. It doesn't have to look like somebody on a yoga mat in complete peace, right? It can be somebody who wakes up and is just by themselves. It can be in the car, it can be anywhere. But really what meditation allows us to do is just to be present with our emotions. And then the context of this presentation is to maybe express gratitude, to think about gratitude in that moment. So what can that look like in your classes? Again, I'm a big fan of, if we have an hour and 20 minutes, I remember when I worked at CTE, the literature supported breaking up mini lectures, right? Mini lectures every 20 minutes, and then getting students to do something. You know, this can be done at the beginning of class, into class, or online in breakout rooms. But this, you just create space to give students time to be present in their moment, to slow down. You know, I hear a lot from people that, you know, life is fast, is going fast right now. So what this does, it slows people down and allows them space to think about some of the good things that are going on in their life. And to be fully transparent with you, out of all these things in the presentation, this is probably one strategy that, for whatever reason, has not worked for me personally. All the others I tried to practice, but this is one that, you know, I just haven't really figured out why. Probably need to reflect more on that, but I can't tell you the research behind this is pretty strong. So the last one, my favorite one, the biggest one, right? So gratitude. I'll talk about three things, right? We know from what we saw earlier that gratitude is real important. And we know, or I know, that not everybody in the world does it on a consistent basis. So here's 3 ideas that you can implement right away with your students. Some of these might take a little more time. I get that, right? So in the class, you can pause, ask students to write a gratitude, reflection gratitude letter. Express appreciation to somebody who's meant something to important in your life, right? They're very simple. Again, you're changing what they're thinking about. Now they're not thinking about, oh, I have all these other things. Now you're asking them to express appreciation to somebody. There's also a gratitude journal. So again, this is something that maybe it might not work in every class, but you can at least promote this to students, right? So I know from research that people who express gratitude consistently, like in a journal, are happier, experience more joy, more resilient, and some of those other positive emotions. So if I was teaching a class that this could fit, I would assign a gratitude journal that they had to write an entry once a week of something different of what they're grateful for or who they're grateful for. And I think what we'll find is that people don't do this all the time. And here's why. Again, people have argued with me that they say this is fluff, that this is easy. And my argument is it's not easy. Because, and here's why, when we express gratitude, we're flooded with various emotions, positive and sad, right? If I wrote a gratitude letter to my mom who passed away due to cancer, in order to write a letter of appreciation, I have to think about all the wonderful things she did for me. So it's not easy. It's not easy. And it goes back to the idea of it's an intentional effort to engage in something like this. So the other one is gratitude journal. And here's my favorite one. And I'll be transparent with you. I've never tried this, probably for various reasons, but I've heard that this is powerful. And again, it might not fit in every class, but you can promote students to do this. So let's say your student writes a 1-page gratitude letter, old school, like me, I'm old school, whatever that means. I would handwrite the 1-page letter. Have them go visit the person who they wrote the letter to. Have them read the letter to that person. You can imagine the emotions that the other person's going to feel when they get that letter, because we don't get this all the time. I always joke with Alyssa that I do these things, but nobody does it for me, right? Or except family, right? Like that's the point here, that we don't do these things all the time. And here's the bigger one. I didn't write it down because I don't think every class could do this. But let's say you have a class of 30 students and you have time to do something like this. I've read that faculty have what we call gratitude nights, where the professor invites the recipients of the letters to class, and the students read the letter to the recipients right there in class, whether it's face-to-face or online. And just from what I've read and understood, that's powerful, because the recipients aren't expecting it, and just the stories that are flooded in. So really here, yeah, maybe these are more extensive, but again, these could be adapted to first 5 minutes of class, write a paragraph. What are you grateful for? Last 5 minutes of class, what are you grateful for? And again, the final point I'll make here is all you're doing is you're encouraging students to think differently. In my mental health training, I'm a firm believer that we feel and we behave largely to how we think, and what we're asking you to do is to come up with ways, either some of these or some of your others, to encourage students to think differently about their lives. So last slide, I know CT is really big on assessment. I know you're going to have a survey to complete. So why don't we hear from maybe a couple of people, whoever feels comfortable. You see the image here, application. So really the question is, based on what we talked about today, based on what you're doing or what you've read, your own experiences, how do you think you could help students cultivate gratitude or resilience in your class? Is that all right, Dr. Cavazos? Can you have a little time for maybe a few people to share a little bit about that?
Yes, of course, certainly. And of course, our student partners are also welcome to share as well.
I mentioned in the chat that teaching freshman survey history, I like to use the grateful experience or grateful for something that happened in history to kind of focus the students' attention, not just, I never really thought about it as positivity or resilience. I always thought about it in the terms of, why are you grateful that something happened in history? I do a big voter registration push when I was on campus with my students, not because I was pushing a political agenda, but the personal and social responsibility core objective that we're supposed to be focusing on. That was one way that I would, tell students, how are you being personally and socially responsible? One way would be to vote. And then it would bring up, okay, what are you grateful for that's happened in our laws and our creation of our institutions that has made your life better, made a family member's life better, has made our society better, and how are you going to participate in that by being a voter? So it kind of brings all of the history stuff back full circle. It helps them remember the event while also applying it to the present. Because that, for a lot of students, that's one of the reasons why they hate history is, I don't understand what it means to me. Well, here's the 19th Amendment, you're a woman, you now have the right to vote, you can decide your own legal affairs, your own financial affairs, physical affairs, et cetera, because of the 19th Amendment. You're sitting in a classroom because of the 19th Amendment, basically. So that's one of the things that I do with my students.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. What you're doing is you're getting them to think differently about history, right? And it goes back to what we're helping students. We're setting the questions to get them to think differently. I wish, some of my history professors would ask that question, because I promise you, what you're doing is you're changing their outlook on history. You're making it personal. You're creating a personal connection, and that's the whole purpose of this presentation. Is those little things have ripple effects, because now our argument is they're going to have more self-control and more willingness to persevere through maybe some aspects of whatever class that aren't as entertaining because of those questions that you asked. It's awesome. Maybe two more. I see there's a lot of comments in the chat. That's awesome. But maybe a few more.
I'd like to share with you my experience because after we got COVID pandemic, spring semester 19th was really scared for everybody, and students were in the dark moods. And actually, I did not know how to survive because they were like frozen. And I read some articles like, you are doing your best, but they don't hear you. They just blocked. And this situation gave me idea to think, how do I do in the tragic or conflict situation? How do I resilient my students? Because, it is very important if somebody got negative attitude or something, how do you deal with this situation? And I began to work with students, combine exit ticket when I was asking, okay, please, could you write some reflection about class? What did you learn? And now I'm asking, whole last year, I'm asking, okay, how do you feel now? Can you take a moment to think, how do you feel now? What is your appreciation now? How do you feel? So emotional process, it's very important, like I think. And when I began to do it systematically, and students just wrote in at the end of class, because it was online last year, but right now in hybrid, they did on Zoom, on chat. I don't use too fancy any things. And it gives a very nice result because students can express themselves. And I will try, when they're writing, I will try to encourage them. Okay, look, think, are you feeling great, or you feel scared and something panic or something? Just let me know, because we can communicate and to see what we can do now. And when this space, when student can express yourself, and they feel better. I see they feel better. So this is, I think, very nice when students are thinking about yourself, what goes in their life, and they can write and to find out. And I see the reflection. If I see something wrong in somebody, I'm trying to bring individual something. But I think resilient and to, like you said, to create space when students slow down and think about yourself, it is a great strategy for student success. At least to my, in my experience, it gives better student outcomes when student can think and express themselves. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Let me thank you for the great work you're doing, because, all strategies, techniques are great, but it really comes down, the first thing is for the faculty like you and all of us to just make sure we check in with students. Hey, how are you doing? Just to acknowledge that. That's the first step, right? Because then they're more receptive to answer some of the questions. Yeah, and I know I want to mention this again, that I'm not trying to minimize what students have gone through during COVID-19. Some of these things, like if I lost somebody the day of the funeral or the next day, don't ask me these questions, right? Don't ask me. We gotta give people space to think about these things. So I understand it's tricky, but we do know that, like what she mentioned, when we acknowledge to students that we care and we're listening and we see what they're going through, that's the first step, right? That's the start. And we know that not everybody might do that. I know most people do, but I know for me, I need to remember to try to check in with my students more as well. Thank you for sharing that. So maybe we have time for one more.
I guess I'll just share the example that I put in chat. So I feel like this conversation is really meaningful, and I feel like especially people in STEM have a hard time relating these feelings of gratitude, resilience, because I feel like topics like this aren't just talked about in STEM enough. But there's so much in STEM and in the scientific realm that we should be grateful for. So I decided to kind of like formulate a question saying, like asking like if a STEM professor would ever want to implement like a gratification journal, to maybe ask the question, what scientific advancements are you grateful for? There are so many scientific advancements, medical, across, engineering, that we should all be grateful for. And I feel like bringing that to the forefront, especially in a STEM course, will really change students' perspectives and how they feel about STEM, in the sense that, these medical advancements, these scientific advancements, have really changed our lives in a very positive way. And that's something that we can think about in the world that is consumed by chaos. Our world, every day, it seems as though it gets worse and worse, or, the news, you turn on the news and it's like, oh, more tragedy. But I think when we think about, how far we've come from where we were, say 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it's amazing. And thinking about relating this back to COVID, as big of a tragedy as COVID has been, because of medical advancements that we've made and because of scientific advances that we've made, we've been able to curb the death population to a greater degree than we've ever had. So even in these horrific times of tragedy, there are still positive things that we can look back on years down the line.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that. And I love what you shared, and what Dr. Rodriguez said too, how y'all are asking students to express gratitude toward scientific advancements or important moments in history. I had never thought of that. So cool. of that twist. And I hear you about STEM. I know a math instructor who, before students take an examination, she asks them to free write about their anxiety related to math. And I know it's not gratitude, but it's still under that umbrella of creating space for students to think about what they're feeling. So I agree with Andrea as well. Okay, I think two people had their hands up, right?
It's
Jerry,
fine. I
go
can,
ahead.
yeah, I can just share real quick, simple experience, and it's on the lines where, you know, it's so relevant what we say and do with our students, right? And real quick, right? A couple of weeks ago, one of my students was really stressed with everything, you know, family situations that have been going on with, you know, all the COVID things and some other things. And it's just about just as simple as saying, hey, tranquilo, you know, relax. You can do this, right? And it was just all what I said. The students respond with such, you know, she was so grateful because she was like, look, this is exactly what I needed to hear. So what I'm trying to say here, and I mean, I'm not trying to, you know, praise myself. It's just try to be assertive because you never know when there's someone, you know, behind that computer screen or you know, when we talk with somebody and that person needs maybe a phrase, maybe a word just to keep moving forward. So, you know, having that mindset, you know, as a guide will help us, you know, as instructors to help our students. And don't worry for you. You know, you will, you know, have you heard about karma? Well, everything comes back in a positive way. So you do good, you will receive good.
No.
Of course, for me, it's God, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't believe in that, that's fine. You know, let's call it just positive energy. You do good, you will receive good.
That's awesome. No, thank you for sharing that. And you're absolutely right. It starts there. And I know, I know you're a professor, and I know in counseling, like sometimes just throw out everything, all the techniques, just connect with the person, let them know you're present and that you care. And that's what you're doing with your students. And that's
It's just that.
awesome.
It's just that. Exactly. Thank you.
Maybe let's see. I know Dr. Vijoya, I think you had your hand up, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, and keeping it short. So
No, it's
I know
fine.
we're talking about gratitude, and I apologize for not putting my camera on. My internet is a little unstable right now. So I know we're talking about gratitude and, you know, being positive and all of that. But when my students and I were going through this really rough time through the pandemic, I drew upon my childhood. One of the things my mother did when I was very anxious and overwhelmed was to make me write out what was worrying me. And then she'd put it in this little, you know, bag that you could close by pulling on two ends. And she's like, we're just going to throw it away, right? And there was a certain sense of relief in that, a childlike sense of relief. So I wondered if it would work with my students. I put up a blank, you know, sheet of paper on Zoom where they can annotate the PowerPoint, so a blank slide. And I said, write what is bothering you, write what is really ailing you, you know, at this moment. And then we'll have the pleasure of just deleting it all from the screen, you know. And we had a good laugh about it, but later on, when we reflected upon the process, there was this whole sense of, you know, I've put it out there and it's gone for now, even if it is symbolically so. So I thought I'd just share that with you because I know it provided a moment of levity and also, you know, seriously, it did help. It helped me, I know, and it helped the students from the reflection, you know, the feedback that I got from them. That's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
I love that. And that's powerful. I love that. I also, what you just shared remind me of, I've heard a faculty member do too, very similar, just a different tool. They would have students put their worries in a balloon, and then they would let it go. But I know now that that's dangerous for animals, right? So, but it goes to the idea that, you know, we verbalize what we're going through and then we let it go. I love that. Absolutely. It's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. I know we're running short on time. So two things. One, thank y'all very much for being here and for sharing your experiences. And just because I'm always connected back to research and scholarship, and reminds me of what Andrea said, my guess is there's a rich opportunity here for research opportunities in STEM, non-STEM. You know, what's the impact of doing some of these things on students' performance, right? Because I know a lot of people care about that as the outcome variable. So that's my last plug there. Dr. Cavazos, thank you very much.